We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following the breaking news in Missouri. Officials there bracing for a second night of violent protests over a grand jury decision not to indict Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. The Missouri governor, Jane Nixon, says more than 2,000 National Guard troops are now being deployed to prevent the kinds of clashes, the looting, the arson that ravaged parts of Ferguson overnight. Brown's father appealed for calm, but the teen's stepfather, after comforting Brown's grief-stricken mother, apparently instigated some of the violence. There are more than 100 protests planned across the United States tonight, but law enforcement officials, they are vowing there will not be a repeat of the violence in Ferguson. We're covering the breaking news with our correspondents and our guests. They are in key locations, including one of the attorneys for Michael Brown's family, Daryl Parks. He's standing by live. But let's begin our breaking news coverage this hour with CNN's Don Lemon. He's on the ground for us in Ferguson. Don, we're all worried about what's going on. We saw what happened last night to you, to our other reporters, producers, photographers, and to so many people there. What are you seeing right now?
Absolutely. Everyone thought they had this all mapped out. They had it all figured out. And now we're seeing that they're adding more enforcement here. The National Guard on the scene. They are guarding the Ferguson Police Department. Everyone thought they had figured it out, how they might react, whatever the announcement might be, an indictment, a non-indictment. Law enforcement thought they had, officials thought they had, the people thought they had. But as we have learned, when it comes to Ferguson, nothing goes off as planned.
Tonight, Ferguson is a city at war with itself. Police and protesters vowing to return to the streets scarred by fires and looting, while community and faith leaders call for the chaos to become calm.
We are all in this together. We are all on the same side.
Missouri's governor says National Guard troops will step up their presence tonight, already on scene at the Ferguson Police Department, hopefully avoiding more of these scenes. But there is a palpable sense that the outrage that fueled fires overnight has only intensified as angry business owners visited burnout shells of their destroyed stores. Late this afternoon in a hastily arranged press conference, Attorney General Eric Holder weighed in.
It is clear, I think, that acts of violence threaten to drown out those who have legitimate voices, legitimate demonstrators, and those acts of violence cannot and will not be condoned.
Today, as attorneys for Michael Brown's parents repeated calls for restraint, they found themselves answering for a lack of it in this video, showing Brown's stepfather overnight shouting angrily to a crowd, seeming to suggest they stoked the fire. The outburst came after an emotional plea from Brown's mother.
I never had to go through nothing like this.
The family's attorney condemned the stepfather's comments while chastising the prosecutor who led the grand jury investigation of Officer Darren Wilson.
Raw emotion, not appropriate at all, completely inappropriate. And, you know, God forbid your child is killed the way they killed, and then they get that just devastating announcement in the manner it was announced, and somebody put a camera on your face. What would be your immediate reaction?
Meantime, for the first time since the August shooting, Darren Wilson is speaking publicly, telling ABC News he was just doing his job and feared for his life. The city's mayor says the 28-year-old policeman remains on administrative leave as the city he once patrolled braces for another night of protest.
People didn't know what daybreak would bring here. Now they're not sure what nightfall will bring. Wolf?
Standing by, Don. We want to hear from the President of the United States. He's Chicago, back in his hometown. We're told might thank a few of the local folks there. He's got a whole separate speech prepared on immigration, but he's going to begin his remarks, we're told, after some preliminary introductory words with a statement on what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri. That's where you are, Don. But let's stand by. I don't want to hear all the thanks that the president's about to make all these guests that are there. But, Don, let's talk for a moment while the president thanks some of the local dignitaries who are there.
Absolutely.
The National Guard, you see them getting ready to be deployed.
Yeah, they are getting ready to be deployed, and as we have been looking.
All right, hold on, Don. I think the president has just started. Hold on.
Not just in Ferguson, Missouri, our neighbor to the south, but all across America. As many of you know, a verdict came down, or a grand jury made a decision yesterday that upset a lot of people. And as I said last night, the frustrations that we've seen are not just about a particular incident. They have deep roots in many communities of color who have a sense that our laws are not always being enforced uniformly or fairly. That may not be true everywhere, and it's certainly not true for the vast majority of law enforcement officials, but that's an impression that folks have, and it's not just made up. It's rooted in realities that have existed in this country for a long time. Now, as I said last night, there are productive ways of responding and expressing those frustrations, and there are destructive ways of responding. Burning buildings, torching cars, destroying property, putting people at risk. That's destructive, and there's no excuse for it. Those are criminal acts. And people should be prosecuted if they engage in criminal acts. But what we also saw, although it didn't get as much attention in the media, was people gathering in overwhelmingly peaceful protests here in Chicago and New York, and Los Angeles, other cities. We've seen young people who are organizing and people beginning to have real conversations about how do we change the situation so that there's more trust between law enforcement and some of these communities. And those are necessary conversations to have. You know, we're here to talk about immigration, but part of what makes America this remarkable place is being American doesn't mean you have to look a certain way or have a certain last name or come from a certain place. It has to do with a commitment to ideals, a belief in certain values. And if any part of the American community doesn't feel welcomed or treated fairly, that's something that puts all of us at risk. And we all have to be concerned about it. So my message to those people who are constructively moving forward, trying to organize, mobilize, and ask hard, important questions about how we improve the situation, I want all those folks to know that their president is going to work with them. And I think you'll find a lot of separate and apart from the particular circumstances of Ferguson, which I am careful not to speak to because it's not my job as president to comment on ongoing investigations and specific cases, but the frustrations people have generally, those are rooted in some hard truths that have to be addressed. And so those who are prepared to work constructively, your president will work with you. And a lot of folks, I believe, in law enforcement, and a lot of folks in city halls and governor's offices across the country want to work with you as well. So as part of that, I've instructed Attorney General Eric Holder not just to investigate what happened in Ferguson, but also identify specific steps we can take together to set up a series of regional meetings focused on building trust in our communities. And next week, we'll bring together state and local officials and law enforcement and community leaders and faith leaders to start identifying very specific steps that we can take to make sure that law enforcement is fair and is being applied equally to every person in this country. And we know certain things work. We know that if we train police properly, that improves policing and makes people feel that the system's fair. We know that when we have a police force that is representative of the communities it's serving, that makes a difference. We know that when there's clear accountability and transparency when something happens, that makes a difference. So there's specific things we can do. And the key now is for us to lift up the best practices and work city by city, state by state, county by county, all across this country, because the problem is not just a Ferguson problem, it is an American problem. And we've got to make sure that we are actually bringing about change. The bottom line is nothing of significance, nothing of benefit results from destructive acts. I've never seen a civil rights law or a health care bill or an immigration bill result because a car got burned. It happened because people vote. It happened because people mobilize. It happened because people organize. It happens because people look at what are the best policies to solve the problem. That's how you actually move something forward. So don't take the short-term easy route and just engage in destructive behavior. Take the long-term, hard but lasting route of working with me and governors, officials to bring about some real change. And to those who think that what happened in Ferguson is an excuse for violence, I do not have any sympathy for that. I have no sympathy at all for destroying your own communities. But for the overwhelming majority of people who just feel frustrated and pained because they get a sense that maybe some communities aren't treated fairly or some individuals aren't seen as worthy as others, I understand that. And I want to work with you, and I want to move forward with you. Your president will be right there with you. All right? So that's what we need to focus on. Let's be constructive. Now, I appreciate your patience because I know you came here to talk about immigration, but this is relevant.
All right, so there you hear the President of the United States. He's going to move on now and talk about the immigration proposals he put forward the other day, but he was very, very firm. There are productive ways, he says, to deal with the anger, the frustration. There are destructive ways. The President said there's no excuse for the looting, for the fires, for the damage. Those individuals who committed those illegal acts, he said, should be prosecuted. Jim Acosta, you're our senior White House correspondent. You're monitoring what the president is doing. Any indication the president might be heading over to Ferguson to try to reassure the folks there, to calm the situation? I know that's been under consideration for some time.
And in fact, Wolf, I asked the president last night after he made those remarks here at the briefing room in the White House, and he basically hedged as to whether that might happen. And earlier today, a top White House spokesman, Eric Schultz, said that is under consideration. So it is something the White House is looking at. And obviously, it would go a long way in perhaps calming things down in Ferguson, but they would have to do it at the right time. And now is obviously not the right time, Wolf. But as you heard the president say, they do want to take some concrete steps over here at the White House, bring together what White House officials refer to as stakeholders in this conversation about race and law enforcement in America. And it sounds like the president is going to be convening that sort of meeting next week over at the White House on that subject, setting up regional meetings around the country. There's been some talk that Eric Holder, the Attorney General, may be doing some of that over the coming weeks. And Valerie Jarrett, top official over here at the White House, she was on the phone with Governor Nixon last night and earlier today. And so the White House has really been sort of doing a full court press on this over the last 24 hours. But as we know from watching that brief statement that the president made last night and what's happening now in Chicago, that he's sort of having a split screen presidency for the moment, because as he's speaking in front of the cameras, we're seeing things unfold in Ferguson, and the White House is obviously very conscious of that, Wolf.
Yeah, very conscious indeed. Jim Acosta, stand by.